Let's be innovative. Let's challenge the norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The Buttkicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. With half the 2023 Buttkicker Sports Car Series in the books, time is ticking away until the championship showdown under the night lights in Daytona. A diverse set of challenges still await as we make our way into 2024. How today sees a refreshing trip into the mountains where at altitude, the turbo engines will hum in content. Welcome to Austria and welcome to the BMW Performance Driving School Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring. Hello everyone and welcome back to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 Buttkicker Sports Car Series. My name is Arjuna Kenkipati, delighted to be joined alongside by Andrew Kinsella as we get ourselves ready to get underway. Let's dive straight into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show because 9 races down, still 9 to go, and boy, Andrew, has this been an electric start to the multi-class era of Lionheart racing. As we take a look at the next level racing schedule, yes, the Red Bull Ring are home today, but up next in just 7 days' time, a very different challenge over at the Road America.
There's going to be a lot of pond hopping over the course of the first bit of this second half of the schedule here, Arjuna. Not only going back to Road America, but then in a few weeks after that, back over across to Great Britain and Silverstone, then back to the mecca of speed that is Speedway Indiana and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, back over to the Nürburgring, and then we get to actually stay in Europe for a little while. So it's definitely going to be a different challenge this half of the season for these drivers. A lot more European flair to it, a lot more classic endurance style racing and classic endurance tracks. So very interesting to see what these drivers make of it.
And of course, you say we stay in Europe for 2 races, then to Japan for 2 back-to-back rounds, but those split by almost a full month, and then we make our way into the second week of 2024 under the night lights, when we're all getting ready to go for the 2024 Rolex 24. We will crown our champions. It should be a very exciting finish to the campaign. Here's a look at the LMDH BMW Performance Driving School Championship standings, where it's just 3 at the front between Badefer and Kraus, and then only 5 back to Austin Young. Graham Sanders staying in touch as well. Alex Guillon, Michael O'Brien split by just 1 point, and then a gaggle behind. Still so much to get determined here, Andrew, in this prototype machine.
So many storylines to follow, Arjuna. You look at Graham Sanders, you see him in 4th, but that doesn't really tell the story of his season, where he's come from very much a rough start to the season, where he was even outside of the top 10, all the way back to now grasping at the coattails of the top 3 here. He's very much still in this championship conversation, and he's been looking very, very strong the last few weeks.
And of course, I think we've got some tracks where maybe some drivers will have more experience than others. Gonna be excited to see how that plays out, of course, with the multi-class aspect of things. As we take a look at the GT3 standings, well, Sean Campbell's streak has come to an end. It's still 8 in 8 for him in terms of the victories, but after missing the last round, a victory is being directed in someone else's direction. It is now just 1 point, though, that split Ryan Notice and Josh Chin as they battle for effectively second in the points there. And in AM, with Chase Wilson making an expected absence, the gap to Trevor Malone seemingly starting to shrink, but of course, with the scoring complication, Andrew, in the AM Championship, Wilson's lead still looking pretty healthy.
Definitely healthier than we were probably expecting, but the AMs didn't have the easiest time at Mosport and Monza. There were 2 tough tracks for the amateur drivers to really get a grip on, so it's definitely been a case where they need to step up here in the absence of Chase Wilson, see if we can get a little bit more interest there for that AM Championship.
And of course, when you look at those team names, it all builds into a combined team championship where the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing team and the LMDH have broken away. Now, 119 points clear of Synergy Lavoie Motorsports, and then in the GT3, a similar story for Synergy Motorsports, who very much with Matthew Morhart backing up Ryan Otis, breaking away at the very front there. It's very hard, though, Andrew, to have 2 drivers be consistent in these classes, it would seem.
Consistency really is the key, and nobody exemplifies that more, I think, than Synergy Motorsports with Matthew Morhart and Ryan Otis, 2 of the most consistent drivers on the GT3 side of things, barring, of course, Sean Campbell and his consistently running first. I think that perfectly shows just what having that consistency can do for your point total.
Absolutely. Let's talk to you about the Gomez Sim Industry Series details in this very first year of the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. The 10th year, though, of the Lionheart Racing Series. We break out 2 ultimate driving machines, the BMW M Hybrid V8 and the M4 GT3, both featuring custom fixed setups built by the Majors Garage as the drivers fight for their share of $18,000 in cash and prizes. The main attraction, of course, being the fact that both of our champions in the LMDH and the GT3 standings will walk away with the BMW M4 GT4 driving experience at the BMW Performance Driving School. All that as they battle in 90-minute timed races with live race control. And so we'll talk to you now about our arena track analysis. As we make our way into the Styrian Mountains, there are just 10 turns here, but an inch too wide at every single one of them, and the track limit police will come knocking. That is definitely something, Andrew, that you want to be watching for as you work your way toward the end of these races.
Absolutely. This is one of those tracks that just invites you to test those track limits, but it'll come back to bite you if you go just a millimeter too wide on some of these corner exits. So definitely something that we need to keep track of as the race goes on, and the drivers will have to keep in mind as they're trying to push and jockey for position and negotiate the traffic that inevitably happens on a 10-turn racetrack, because we were talking about this before we went on the air. There's 2 very long straightaways, and then there's a long section where it's very difficult for faster cars to negotiate past slower cars. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they deal with this technical circuit.
And of course, with it being such a short track, they are going to be dealing with that traffic so much more frequently. through the course of about 25 laps on average, the fuel run across of your two classes. Pit lane delta here, relatively short, but the pit lane entry, the pit lane exit, definitely something to keep an eye on. The elevation, never something you get the true sense of when you look at these track maps, but that is one of the defining features here, Andrew, of a racing facility now known as the Red Bull Ring.
Absolutely. Of course, this is just the latest iteration of the Red Bull Ring. There's been multiple iterations, and this more modern style that they've had for the last decade or so has really produced some fantastic races in Formula One and in the World Endurance Championship as well. You look at that turn 3 there, that hard corner at the end of the second straightaway there, that's going to be definitely an area to watch on the opening lap, as well as even the first corner is a very difficult to negotiate the corner exit, and there's going to be a lot of cars funneling down in there on that race start.
There is still, of course, the matter of qualifying as the drivers get themselves rolled out and away. They get the track to themselves and the opportunity to focus on those track limits. We look from up above. It's time to thank all those that make this coverage possible, starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. Butt kicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine redline. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real race car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slicks. You'll get fitted with a racing suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about their thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry leader in cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time interaction between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. From simple logos to full branding for your companies, virtual designs, deliveries raced by Indy 500 champions. Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. Visit graphicsesports.com. As mentioned, the qualifying session underway. Still about 4 and a bit minutes left on the clock. John Baderford sits on pole, 38 thousandths back to Graham Sanders inside the LMDH. And look at that at the front of the GT3s, Andrew. No surprise to see Sean Campbell back on top.
Sean Campbell once again showing the way now that he's back and his computer problems have been resolved. I think the big story so far is that Josh Chin has not put a representative lap time down yet in this session. He is all the way back at the very back of the GT3 field right now.
Yeah, and that is going to be a big amount of work for him. Phil Kraus, another one who's going to be starting from the very back, another driver in the private label team hype contingent. Top 5 in the LMDH though, split by, just under 0.2 of a second. Yeah,
the three Hydra Race Geodesic Racing teammates have put in nearly identical lap times. There's virtually nothing in it between the three of them, which is a little bit of a change from the last couple of races where Graham Sanders has seemed to have the measure of his teammates. So it'll be interesting to see whether John Baderford and Austin Young can sort of reassert their dominance of the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team stable there.
There are some drivers still running out there on track, but none realistically out there and looking to improve. Jim Herrick, the last driver who is out there on a lap, that is going to count. One of our AM drivers brings the BMW out of that final corner. One of the many places where track limits will be a bit of a contentious point. Going to be no improvement there. This is definitely one of those tracks, Andrew, with the track limits being so strict, where it can be difficult to hit your marks repeatedly.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to see some of the apexes here. And if you miss the apex even a little bit, the track seems to fall away from you on many of these corner exits, and it almost sucks you off the track and into the track limit danger zone on the exit of these corners here.
Still 2 and a bit minutes left to go in this qualifying session before we get underway. I like this aerial shot because you see the karting facility in the middle, the infield of the track. You also get, Andrew, a great look at that middle and final sector where, like you mentioned, it's going to be difficult for the prototypes, even with the higher downforce, the more mechanical grip that they've got, to really get through the traffic safely and quickly.
Yeah, the straightaways on that second half of the track are just really not long enough to properly get alongside, so there'll be a fair number of dive bombs into these corners on the final sector, because a lot of times if you don't get the pass done on one of the 3 long straightaways, it can take you all the way up, maybe even until turn 8, turn 9 to actually get the pass done. So there's a lot of time to be made up if you can get the moves done before the people who are chasing you do.
Let's see if we can ride on board with the provisional pole position lap. Here's John Baderfer going to take us up through turn number 1, being careful to not grab the sausage curb on that left-hand side, and then working his way down a decidedly not straight back straightaway kind of deal. On the rise up into the 3rd corner, heavy braking zone just after the 150, and then set up as wide as you can on entry to funnel yourself in towards turn number 4.
And this is the final straightaway. This is the one we're talking about. This is your last real passing opportunity if you're a prototype, basically all the way through here, down into turn 7, turn 8. But it's a steep right-hand downhill corner. Track sort of falls away, and then you have to get right back over to the right-hand side of the track, throw it in there onto the left, and this is almost a double apex. You almost treat these two as almost one corner, except for with a little short burst of the throttle in the middle of it, and then exit a turn 8 here. This is your next real opportunity if you're a prototype to pass a GT3 car now into the final sector.
And this is also where you got to be careful with those track limits. Look how wide you can go. Doesn't mean that it is always necessarily a wise thing to flirt with being that wide. What a great lap that was, though, from Baderfer to be able to put it on pole position. That is qualifying officially in the books, though. We are ready to go to kick off the back half of the 2023 Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. A wild ride in the first half of the campaign. Let's run you down through the starting grid for this, the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring. And so here is the Butt Kicker starting grid. It's a Hydra Race geodesic 1, 2, and 3. Baderfer leads Sanders and Young with 76 thousandths between the 3 of them. Flynn Lazier then on the outside of the second row sees the Graphics LC teammates behind Matt Taylor and Michael O'Brien with a bit of a gap between them. Matt Taylor going to be looking to hold on to the draft and seeing if they can do something in the fuel window later on. Alex Guyon and then Alex van der Sant find themselves split by just 18 thousandths of a second on the 4th row, while David Sirwa, the final car with a time on the board, finds Bill Kraus and Caleb Bensi stacked up behind. Slightly more in the GT3 field, where it's once again the WMP Racing number 26 of Sean Campbell that will bring us to the green. Ryan Otis will be alongside, Miguel Vigo, Matthew Morhart behind on the 2nd row. Brian Bennett and then Lionel Callisto in the matching Synergy Motorsports Blue Machines will share row 3, while rolling from 7th, Tyler Graf brings the new livery number 98 alongside his Graphics LC counterpart in Andrew Marquez. Carlos Villa, Creighton Carter, Logan Spath, and then Gabe Wood through the top 12 as we begin to dice our way into the AM drivers. 13th for Jim Herrick, Jimbo Pfeiffer in 14th with Travis Yeagerlane, Trevor Malone, Drew White, and then Josh Chin all the way back in 18th position. Plenty of work for some of those drivers to do as they get ready to roll on what is a abbreviated formation lap. As ever, time to run you down through today's featured on-board cameras, starting with Michael O'Brien in that Graphics LC 145. He rides with the butt kicker. Sim racing is better with butt kicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. Back in the GT3, Jimbo Pfeiffer carries HyperX. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. While Tyler Graf rides with Gomez Sim Industries, makers of high-end esports equipment and controls. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Pace car's already off and away, and the field is left in control of the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing Trio. What's going to happen as we throw 90 minutes onto the clock once more? Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart, and this is the start of the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring. Up the hill into the opening corner they will go. It's only side by side for third, as Graham Sanders and Austin Young do not want to fight in and amongst themselves. A tidy start though, as they rise up to turn 3.
Really nice start from those prototypes. Just as they're coming up into turn 3, the GT3s are getting underway as well. But the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team is dominating the front. Phil Kraus on his way up through the field in the prototypes.
Side by side for second in the GT3s as they work themselves down in the rise into turn 3. It's Vigo and Otis that will go battling and allowing Sean Campbell to almost break the draft. Down the hill into the middle sector, by the way. A couple of battles in the LMDH class, but the teammates at the front not deciding to fight, not tripping over one another.
Yeah, surprisingly little carnage in both classes at this point, Arjuna. I think we were expecting just a little bit more carnage, but it looks like all these drivers were possibly a little on the cautious side, just making sure that they got through that first lap and first corner is okay.
I think given how Mosport and Monza went for some, they wanted to just stay out of trouble, and that's what, for the most part, we have seen at the end of the opening lap, where John Baderfer will lead from Sanders and Young, still the teammates controlling at the front. Bit of margin to Flynn Lazier. Josh Chin can't really afford to wait around. Yes, the draft's going to help out the drivers in the GT3 stay in touch with one another. The problem becomes here, Andrew, that once the traffic starts to cycle on through, the further back you are, traditionally, the more time you're going to lose.
Absolutely. The cars will get strung out over the course of the next few laps, and Josh Chin really needs to make hay while these cars are all close together, get through as many drivers as he can in these opening 3 or 4 laps, and then it'll start to slow down for him, both as he gets up towards faster drivers, but also just the distance between the cars gets greater and greater. But yeah, it'll be interesting to watch both of the private label team hype drivers try to come from the back here.
And in stark contrast, Ryan Otis 1 point ahead in the championship, sits in second, and currently not too much of a fight going on. Ching gets past. Now Trevor Malone is already up into 13th. That's 5 positions gained so far today. But as the GT3 packs heading up in through turn 3, LMDH drivers coming to the end of the second lap, and already I think within maybe 5 laps of us getting into traffic.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of traffic here today. It's basically 1 minute and 20-second laps for your prototypes and 1 minute 30-second laps for your GT3s. So it's basically 10 seconds a lap difference, 11 or 12 maybe, given it, depending on how quickly they're negotiating that traffic. But that gives, what, 7-8 laps tops before they get into the traffic for the first time?
Yeah, and of course, if they're fighting further back in that GT3 pack and separate themselves out, that will only bring in the traffic a bit faster. There's the conditions, and boy, not a cloud to be seen, and the track temperature's something scorching.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a high temperature. So if you're working in the Fahrenheit, that is 124 degrees Fahrenheit or 51 Celsius. So definitely on the warm side here today for these drivers.
I have the sneaking suspicion that, well, tire's going to be a factor and something taken across all of the pit stops today, at least in some form or one another. Now 2 seconds, by the way, the gap at the very front of the field. Sean Campbell on his return is back to his ruthless, demanding self, and as we take a look at our BMW Performance Driving School driver profile, those stats aren't right. He's 100% across the board. 8 poles, 8 wins, looks set to potentially make that 9-9.
He's certainly off to a promising start today. Of course, mistakes can and do happen, but so far it has been Sean Campbell all the way here in the GT3s. Of course, we're only 5 minutes in, but he's already two and a half seconds almost in front of Ryan Otis, and he just seems to be in another world today.
We do need to find a way to make it a little bit more fair up towards the front, so we are open to suggestions. I'm still thinking that the best idea is to allow us to disturb him on the broadcast every once in a while. Lionel Kalisto's been the first to have made some sort of a mistake, and it's running just that little bit too wide, and amazingly gonna stay out of too much drama.
Of course, that was a little bit of an interesting rejoin there for the car that he came out in front of, but not much Kalisto could have done differently there. You can see he just, the car's moving around a fair bit on this really warm racetrack, and he goes over the curb on the outside, and it just unbalances the car, spins up one of the rear tires, and puts him towards the inside wall. Fortunately, this is Formula One grade track, which means Formula One grade runoff, which means there's not a wall to be seen there.
I mean, yes, but this is still relatively old school in its nature, in that while plenty of corners do have tarmac, there is also enough grass and whatnot, maybe just not as much as we would like to see. We are definitely, by the way, within a lap, I would say, of getting the traffic. Here's the race leader, Betafer, who doesn't yet have sight of the traffic really in front, but you can just see down the road a couple of GT3s heading off into the final sector.
I was going to say you're about 5 seconds too early on that call, because I can see him right there. You can see the closing rate that these drivers have, particularly through that technical section there. Just the downforce of the prototypes is just so immense. It allows them to close right up, but then get into corners like this, and it's so difficult to make your lunge. You have to be very, very authoritative if you're a prototype driver coming through here.
Oh, and one of the GT3s getting a bit scared, getting a bit bullied, and this is not even 10 minutes done in the race. Up the inside in towards turn 1, 2, and 3, all going to funnel on past, and these are the decisions that will differentiate if the teammates are going to be able to break away without having to fight too much with one another. Sanders and Beta for jinking one way then the other, and now with almost 2 seconds back to 4th.
And this is the difficult thing if you're in second or third in this train of prototypes, is you really can't afford to let one get through it and not make that lunge at the same time. So a lot of risks are going to be taken here, I think.
And that's Phil Krause, who I think for a moment did have some contact at the very top of the track, down the hill into the renamed turn 4. It's no longer Schlossgold apparently, it's now Rausch Corner, and into the middle sector. Krause going to be quite authoritative and now getting past everyone up into 11th. He's just got his teammate Josh Chin now up the road to now start to begin to work onto the back of. Flynn Lazier hasn't totally lost ground to the race leaders though. He's within drafting range of Austin Young as we come to the very, I was about to say end of the traffic. Lazier made it a bit more dramatic than it needed to be.
That's one way of getting past a GT3 car. You might have given him a slight heart attack as he did that, but
just slight.
Yeah, it all worked out. Very easily couldn't have, but it did all work out.
Amazingly, all the cars are still pointed in the right direction, with our first cycle of traffic almost all done and dusted. I say that just as the LMDH leaders are getting past the GT3 battle for second.
Yeah, this is the final bit of traffic here that these drivers have got to work through, and I gotta say Flynn Lazier, despite that moment of bravery that he had, has really done a good job of closing up to the leading trio here. He's doing a great job of keeping within contact there, and at the same time, Phil Krause, you mentioned he might have had a slight bit of contact, but at the same time, he's come all the way from 10th after having an end-of-line penalty resulting from Monza's contact that prevented him from qualifying here today. He's come all the way up to 5th and is still in this battle as well.
And this is the great thing about multi-class racing as well, right? Is you've got Otis and Vigo very quick in these GT3 machines, and then you've got Kraus, Lazier, Young, all fighting in their own little race on the track. Two little battles to keep an eye on and try and figure out what's going on. Michael O'Brien hopping something inside of Vigo, but really more just in pressure than anything else. Phil Kraus has been dropped by the top four, you'd have to say, as they run their way now clear of traffic at the end of the 7th lap. 28 laps the expected run for these drivers, and those track temperatures pretty warm. We are going to settle into that rhythm once again, I'd guess, Andrew, a fuel saving for the next bit.
Yeah, I would definitely expect some fuel saving, especially if you're Austin Young right behind your two teammates. There's no point in pushing too hard at this point. You can definitely save some fuel and potentially do some strategy to work its magic in the pit cycle and get around them that way.
Looking rearwards from the race leader, the distinctive gold patterns on the geodesic racing machines. The only problem is you can't really tell the difference between the three cars unless you can pick the numbers apart on them. So they're not necessarily the easiest to differentiate, but we always do our best. Matt Taylor, you said Phil Kraus has worked on forward. Opposite sort of story so far for Matt Taylor, who is down 3 positions into 8th and on the back of Alexander Van der Sande.
Yeah, Van der Sande and Taylor had a little bit of an adventure coming through turn 3, I think. They were right up with Michael O'Brien, but some traffic cost him just a little bit of time, and it allowed Van der Sande to get around Taylor. So the traffic gives and the traffic takes away, and right now Taylor hasn't quite found his happy spot with the traffic yet.
They have probably, another 10 laps of clean air, 7 or 8 to 10 laps of clean air before we'll head off and do the traffic cycle once more. Might get a chance for a third pass through before we get into pit stop cycles. Matt Taylor ran very deep, and I think Caleb Bensey's going to get a chance to spool up the hybrid and have a crack at making a pass, but it won't be on this lap. It will have to come on the future laps. Once again, we are seeing that Matthew Morhart's doing a pretty good job of holding the speed of Ryan Otis and Miguel Vigo. The longer we go into the run, though, the more the 62 struggling to stay in that draft.
Yeah, I think Morhart has really shown that he is on the cusp of making that step up and bridging that gap towards the true front runners in the GT3 class. Of course, Sean Campbell is in a league of his own, but you look at Vigo, Otis, and Chin, they've been sort of the next trio, but Morhart is right on the cusp of joining them and making it a very interesting second half for the rest of the top 5 positions.
Speaking of Joshua Chin, by the way, he has gotten past Andrew Marquez, New York's own, for now 8th position. Finds himself, 14 seconds off of Campbell, so effectively 10 seconds off of Ryan Otis after failing to put in a pretty representative lap time in qualifying, the 73, now on the back of Carlos Villa, and then we'll have to do the long slog of closing up even more ground to those latching onto the final spots inside of the top 5. Lots of work for Chin to do, and I guess hopefully not going to make his life any more difficult, I should say, on strategy.
Yeah, we've talked about Chin's strategy a number of times this year, and I'm not sure it's ever been in a positive light. So maybe coming from the back and forcing him to maybe do a different, longer strategy this time will put him on the right one this time.
Yeah, maybe just. I tell you what, I was not expecting there to be much of a fight up towards the front, but a lap or so ago, there is no doubt about the fact that Sanders was alongside Badefer, and there was a little bit of an argument about who was leading the race for a moment.
Yeah, I'd say that was Sanders saying, I think I can go faster than you, and Badefer saying, you might think you can go faster than me, but you can't get through this corner faster than me.
You can just see how committed on the exit they were, but giving each other enough racing room. What's rule number 1 in racing, Andrew?
Never take out your teammate.
Yeah, exactly. I usually phrase it a little bit differently, but we're aligned on the exact point, which is never, 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 never do you want to be in a room after the race, whether it's a voice channel or a physical room, with someone that's a teammate that you've just crashed into. No.
No, it's not a pleasant talk, regardless of whether you're even in the same room or whether you're just in the same Discord. But I will say, you were quick to write off Phil Kraus getting dropped by this leading quartet here. He isn't really going away at this point, Arjuna. He's really stabilized the gap. He didn't have the best middle sector, but he was down at around 3.5 seconds coming into this lap, and he is sniffing the draft of Flynn Lazier at this point.
Very much on the charge is the 2022 Lionheart Open Wheel Series champ. Getting to about the halfway mark of the fuel run onto the 12th lap of an expected 28-lap fuel window. I still think the Hydra Race teammates at the front looking very, very good, but there is still a long, long way to go. Lazier in the number 4 machine, the white and orange, just at the front of the shot, as Phil Kraus in the pink and black car works out of turn number 3. And it is, I will say, I will agree, Andrew, that it is turn 3. It's not turn 2.
See, I almost disagree with you, because I don't know which corner on that non-straightaway you can call turn 2. But to me, it's either turn 2 or it's about turn 4 or 5.
So the reason why it is turn 3 is because, you know, the biggest thing that, well, now Formula 1 is back at the Red Bull Ring, but before Formula 1 was back, the biggest thing that used to come here and race, by the way, in my opinion, were all on 2 wheels.
That's fair.
And when you're going through that left-hander just before what we call turn 3, the braking zone for the second time, that's pretty scary on 2 wheels. And so I will acknowledge that we can call it turn 3. The problem with that argument is, you know what they've just done in the real world?
What have they done now?
They've added a chicane so that the bikes don't have to go into that regular turn 3 where we go after what was a pretty hellacious incident a couple of years ago.
So what you're saying is that the whole reason that it is turn 3 is no longer the reason it's turn 3.
Yeah, I know. I just devalued my entire argument.
Just so that we're on the same page.
I know, yeah. I set myself up so well, and then I dug my own grave for you, you see?
Yeah. You are conscientious like that, I will say that.
Yeah, you know, at least I stick to my guns. Oh, my goodness. Austin Young stuck to his move, trying to get on through one of the 4D, I believe, racewear cars. And now, with a great view of the Bull and the grandstand sitting in the middle sector, a bit of separation opened up between 3rd and 4th positions.
Yeah, that move cost Young a fair bit of time there, as we see Flynn Lazier making another dive in 9. That one was less optimistic than the last time he went through there with traffic, but it's always fun to ride on board with Flynn Lazier as he negotiates traffic. I will say that.
It is always interesting. I will also just say that I'm coming off a weekend where I commentated on with 3 wide. We'll get back to that one. Josh Chin trying to get past Carlos Villa. And Austin Young putting 2 wheels into the grass. Flynn Lazier is going to try and also get past. And now as Chin tries to climb his way on forward, around the outside, Villa tries to pinch.
Yeah, Villa has the momentum of the outside, but it looks like Josh Chin will just about be able to complete the pass down into the turn 4 area here. And Phil Kraus again makes it 3 wide as Villa and Chin are still side by side.
But it is going to be the cambered nature of the corner. That means Chin can slide wide and will make 7th position his, but it wasn't without costing each other just that little bit more ground. And now it's a 3-second margin up the road that Chin finds Tyler Graf, the next driver to be on the checklist. Even after the little bit of an ambitious move from Austin Young, he is back into the draft, and what is the 3-car Hydra Race train at the very front of the field. Flynn Lazier, Phil Kraus holding in station as well. Pit entry here is not necessarily easy, Andrew, but it is definitely, I think, compared to Monza, at maybe less precarious, at least on exit, more precarious on entry.
Yeah, Monza, you have a fairly straightforward entry. This one, you have to get the car woed down. It's a narrow pit in, and there's a turn involved in it. So a little bit more involved here for sure than we had at Monza, but at least it doesn't spit you basically right back out into the braking zone for turn one quite the same way that Monza does.
No, the thing that scares me as well about pit entry is we'll get a good sense as we jump on board with Young in that number 11 machine, who did lead the championship for a couple of rounds in the early stages. It's the fact that you enter effectively after the penultimate corner, which means that you need to somewhat slow your momentum. Sean Campbell gets well out of the way. He's got a 4-second lead. He doesn't necessarily need to worry about losing time in traffic. So it's out of here. If I'm coming down to the pit lane, maybe I'm on the brakes around now. I'm trying to stick to the right. I'm trying to keep my momentum low because you can see the pit entry's off and well on that right-hand side.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take turn 9 a lot slower if you're coming into pit lane, and that can cause miscommunications, particularly if you're not calling out your pit entries quite as loudly as you should, or maybe you're doing it over the text system that iRacing has. It's going to create potentially some miscommunications down the road here.
It's always interesting, though, to see just how these drivers will battle out on strategy. And we've already seen that you can go side-by-side out of turn 3. They've tried in Formula 1 on occasion, and it usually ends pretty badly, doesn't it? Same thing down here out of turn 4.
Particularly if your car happens to be silver, I believe.
Or if you're just Alex Albon. I think that's also part of it.
That is true, but Alex Albon has his own challenges to deal with.
That is very true indeed. I will say, as 10 minutes to go until we expect to see the pit window truly opened. Jim Herrick's headed down to the pit lane. I was just about to say, things looking good for everyone out on track. For the Hydro Race drivers in particular, we saw them yesterday in the BMW MSIM Cup. And to get back to the story that I was trying to tell Andrew, that was a crazy race for them in particular as well, because we had the mix of drivers of this level, including Mr. Austin Young, and then we had some 200 I-rating drivers.
And nothing bad has ever happened when you put like several thousand I-rating drivers with 200 level I-rating drivers.
No, it was as one would expect, quite chaotic, but definitely we've seen worse in that series, unfortunately, so it definitely was not as bad as I think some might be thinking. Phil Krause still within 2 seconds of Flynn Lazier, but not really seeing the inroads coming at this stage. And once again, just a reminder, track temperature is pretty scorching today.
Yeah, very, very hot out there, and this track is not undemanding on the tires either. The surface is very smooth, so it's very dependent on mechanical grip and keeping the tires under you. So it's definitely going to be a consideration for these drivers, and you have to think that there's going to be a little bit of an advantage for John Baedefer in that front, just because he will have the fresh air and the clean air on his wings the whole race, whereas with Sanders and Young tucked up behind him this whole time, they will start to notice their tires going away towards the end of the stint.
Absolutely. Let's go check out what happened to Jim Herrick in the 40 Racewear machine. Oh, a little bit clumsy on the entry, and that's a hard hit into the wall, and in a front engine machine always going to end quite badly there. Jump on board, Andrew, and tell us what you see.
Yeah, so coming up here into turn 1, it's an uphill braking zone, and then if you turn in just a little bit too early, which I think Herrick does, he hits that sausage curb that marks the apex, and as soon as he does that, it starts wheel hopping, and the car just never comes back. It's always going into that inside wall there.
And so it means that is the first official retiree of the day, and Jim Herrick, out of the 29 that started, becomes the first to be watching on from the sidelines. Another couple of the LMDHers just working their way through in the traffic sequence. The leader's still very much clear of all of that, heading off with still 10 laps to go in terms of our expected pit window for these drivers. Probably around 6 laps or 7 laps to go for the GT3 drivers. What does that mean, Andrew? It means that we've got the drivers know that they can go longer than 30 minutes on the full amount of fuel that they are allowed. It means we've got a bit of an interesting pit window coming up.
It absolutely does. This is going to be very interesting to watch because with it being about 10 laps to go for the prototypes, that means that they can probably, as we actually have a battle for the lead here, I'll get back to this in a second, with Graham Sanders doing a nice move there on his teammate John Batafer, and now it's Sanders to the lead for the first time in the race.
This time by not really a stern defense by Batafer, and so Graham Sanders for the first time today, new race leader, but it's still a Hydra Race geodesic racing driver, and they did it crucially without losing time to Flynn Lazier behind.
Yeah, and I think this might be a little bit of strategery from John Batafer. I wonder if he's just been out there in the front for so long. He's like, I need to save just a little bit of fuel here, make my fuel number the way and the pit strategy the way I want it. So the best way to do that is to get right in behind his teammate and draft for a little bit.
It comes at an important time as well, Andrew. Sorry, because guess what? Traffic's about to be something that they're going to deal with once again.
Absolutely, and just to cap off both the traffic point and the fuel point, basically, if they do have 8 to 10 laps to go in this stint, that means that not only are they going to pass the traffic now, but they'll catch them one more time just as it's getting to be about the time for these prototypes to come down pit lane. So it'll be interesting to see who tries to negotiate the traffic and who tries to subvert the traffic by maybe taking a little bit of an early stop.
Well, that's Austin Young trying to get up the inside of one of those GT3 entries outside of the top 10. Flynn Lazier is being slightly reeled on in by Phil Kraus, but it's a 10th here and it's a 10th there. It's at this point not anything that's going to see the pass be a realistic opportunity in this cycle through of traffic. I did wonder if the 100 of Graham Sanders, after punching the way to the lead, was going to try and take a bit of a breakaway, being aggressive and taking the opportunities through traffic. 8/10 and building as we dive into that final sector.
Yeah, he certainly was a little bit aggressive, a little bit more aggressive than Batafer has been through the traffic, and it has definitely paid off for him. Austin Young is all over the back of his teammate meanwhile, so I'm almost wondering whether Young is looking to get by Batafer as well here.
So we are now officially 20 laps down. Only 8 laps or so to go before we expect the drivers to make their way on in. And that margin, boy, is it just parachuting on up right now, 1.5. And Austin Young not close enough to really have a look. The interesting thing is the margin between first and fifth position holding pretty constant. So Phil Kraus in this sequence has really had a net gain as Tyler Graf's around and watching the rejoin.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an unfortunate incident there for Tyler Graf. He was having a really strong race to that point, and that's going to cost him a good 5 or 6 positions. But the battle really is in this LMDH field, and we've been focusing on Batafer and Young. But yeah, you touched on Kraus. He's done a fantastic job to stay in almost constant contact with the leader. And Flynn Lazier, we haven't really talked about him too much other than his exploits with the GT3 traffic, but he's just been driving a nice, consistent race, consistent lap times, lap after lap. So really, it's still anyone's game in this top 5.
Just trying to stay out of trouble, which Michael O'Brien has not been able to do. And the Kiwi will find himself slipping, sliding through the grass and now outside of the top 7. We'll take a look at what happened to him, but only after we pick up what happened to Graf in the number 98 for Graphics LC. So Josh Chin is clear. Oh, and it's going to be on the sausage curb on the outside, just unsettled in the way that the car didn't necessarily want. And then as Graf tried to rejoin without clipping the wall, there was definite contact there, but hopefully minimal sort of contact. Here's what happened then to O'Brien as he tried to work through traffic.
Yeah, I think what happened there was he was anticipating trying to go under both of the cars there, and he just wasn't really anticipating the BMW to get on the brakes the way he did, because the BMW was sort of getting pinched off in front of him, and then so it forced him to jump on the brakes, and when he did, it just locked the rears and it put him into the grass there.
And so another couple of drivers having issues, but still no one joining the retirement club. That Jim Herrick sits as the only unfortunate person watching on from the sidelines right now. One more lap and then we will have less than 60 minutes to run, and still without any sort of pit stop so far. And margin between the three teammates at the front, the biggest that it's ever been. Flynn Lazier with the best opportunity that he has had so far. Climb into those podium spots, trying to set it up out of turn number 1, bottled up behind traffic, spooling up the hybrid. Who's going to get the best run into the braking zone?
Young has had a miserable time this time through the traffic, and he is on the defensive here into turn 3. Lazier with the nice out-braking maneuver on the outside doesn't quite have what it takes to get underneath them, and this puts them right into the lap of Phil Krause as well. So this is a 3-car battle for third now.
Gotta wonder, given that the fuel window 5, maybe 4 laps away, depending on how much they have burned, would you potentially dive down to the lane as Austin Young? Was that a slowdown, or is there something else going on?
No, that was on the exit of turn 4 there, Arjuna. He put a wheel off into the gravel and it nearly turned the car around on him. He just barely saved it, but it cost him all his momentum and allowed Flynn Lazier by the number 11 car.
I think more importantly, though, still pointed in the right direction. Now, with the stranglehold at the front for the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing contingent seemingly broken, let's cycle onto the onboard and just ride with Young's 11. Oh, and you'll see there, just once he dug into the gravel, Andrew, not much the steering would let him do.
No, at that point, you're just doing whatever you can to keep the car pointed straight, and you have to let off the gas. Otherwise, it's very easy to just have the car spin straight across the track. So he did a really good job of saving that car. You saw the quick hands on the onboard, and that's what it takes, coordination between quick hands and quick feet.
Not just fighting up towards the front, by the way. We've been keeping a close eye on it. Michael O'Brien, after the incident, now spat into a battle for 7th. Teammate Graphics at Graphics LC, Matt Taylor in front. But the Team Race vs. Machine of Caleb Bensi behind. By the way, David Sirot becomes the first to come down to pit lane at the end of lap 24.
And Sirwad definitely needed to do something slightly different in order to maybe move up here. He's been sort of trolling around at the back, just slightly off this battle between what was Taylor and Bensi, and now is added O'Brien as well. So just trying something a little bit different here. And it's never really a bad call to try and split the race into nice even thirds if you can, as we see O'Brien getting around Matt Taylor there, and that should release the driver of Michael O'Brien towards possibly getting up to Alexander Van de Sande as well.
Let's take a look, by the way, at a moment for Miguel Vigo. Crunch on the inside, pushed out wide, and the result, well, it's automatic in the iRacing world. You get a slowdown penalty, a message to relinquish a bit of the time that you quote-unquote gained, and now Vigo no longer in a podium spot. It is the Synergy Motorsports duo of Morhart and Otis that sit in 2nd and 3rd. Pressure is still on, though, from the number 66, the black and gold machine. Vigo directly now behind Morhart.
And for Vigo, very similar incident to what happened with Jim Herrick. The difference between what happened with Herrick and what happened with Vigo is Herrick got loose and tried to drive and power through it, whereas Vigo, as soon as he hit that inside apex sausage curb, got on the brakes, allowed it to go out wide. Yes, he had that slowdown penalty, but he lived to fight another day.
Still plenty of time to fight as well. That's the thing for Miguel Vigo, and even if not going to be focusing on grabbing 2nd here today, the battle for the podium might very much still keep his attentions alive, and traffic going to keep him awake, that's for sure, even in these evening times here in the US. Again, we are past the first 30 minutes of the race, and with the drivers seemingly comfortable on fuel, it means that we have that question about how long they will all spend in the pit lane. Margin, by the way, for the race leader, now up to 2.2 seconds.
Sanders did a really good job this time through of negotiating traffic, and it's allowed him to break the draft to John Beta for So this is the first time in the race where we've really had separation between that top three. Of course, Lazier and Young are still going at each other. Young is caught back up to the back of the number 4 car, and they're now a good 5 seconds behind Sanders. So real good job from that number 100 car negotiating the traffic that time through.
We are getting a couple more of the GT3s down on the pit lane. Josh Chin comes in after 22 complete laps, so that's only 1 lap early. And you can see is up on the jacks, is getting some tires onto the machine, and we'll see if that's going to potentially bring Chin back up into the mix in the battle, at least for the top 5, if not even for now a 3rd spot in that podium class. We are seeing Beta dives to the lane, and after running for so long at the very front of the field, maybe that's not a huge surprise.
No, I think Beta, because he was leading for so long, definitely wanted to come in, and he knew he was going to have to come in first. And they're just at the point where they're starting to catch up to the back of the GT3 field again. So this was what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where it's a good strategy to maybe get yourself back out into clean air, be able to run a few laps without the GT3 traffic, and use that to get back to your teammate Graham Sanders, who's done a fantastic job of putting in a little gap there.
So there is John Beta for rolling away. You did see the prototype machine up on the jacks as well. 28.2 seconds stationary for Beta. That is the number to keep an eye on. See if Lazier, Young or Kraus come in this time by. They hypothetically could go 1 lap longer onto the 28th lap of the window and make the math even more interesting later on. Vigo, Morhart and Bennett are all in the GT3 field, leave Campbell, Otis and Villa to go the 1 lap longer, while Sanders stays out, while Young stays out as well. Oh, this is worst case scenario for Lazier and Kraus, who get stuck behind the GT3 on pit entry.
Yeah, particularly for Lazier, that's going to cost him at least 2, maybe even 3 seconds, just because the GT3 driver can't negotiate that narrow pit entry any faster than he did. So, yeah, difficult situation there for Kraus and Lazier, and I think that's going to be advantage to Austin Young in that battle.
It is also surely going to be advantage going the way of John Bedifer, who dives out of that penultimate corner, pushing as wide on the track limits as would be allowed. Alexander Van der Sande is also into the lane, and now for Lazier and as well for Kraus, are they going to come in behind other drivers? Well, has Lazier gotten a speeding penalty after coming in behind a GT3 machine?
I mean, I'd be very surprised if he had, but it definitely appears that way, doesn't it?
37.1 seconds stationary. I'll be honest, I have absolutely no idea.
It's either a very full tank of gas that Lazier took there, or the other thing it could have been was maybe a little bit of mandatory repair if he hit a curb wrong and had to get something repaired.
Have to wait and see, but I am quite curious about what that might be. There's Matthew Morhart, who after a 3 seconds shorter pit stop than what we saw for Miguel Vigo, has actually built a little bit of separation. Sean Campbell going to clear himself and retake the lead of this race. But after Ryan Otis took a 22.1 second pit stop, it seems as though for Synergy Motorsports they are going for a slightly shorter stint this time in the race, a longer stop potentially, or more even pit stop compared to what some of their other competitors will have second time down the lane.
And correct, what's happened with Miguel Vigo in this pit cycle?
That was a 3 second longer pit stop. Oh, did he just disconnect? He just left the session.
Yes, he did. Something has happened with Miguel Vigo.
So a 3 second longer stop. That's what I did talk about. After that, I have no clue. Austin Young has come out in third, cleared by 3 seconds of Phil Kraus and then 10 seconds of Flynn Lazier. But plenty of confusion right now after Miguel Vigo, who is running in contention for third, has had his day come to an end.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and see what happened, but it's definitely a mystery for now. Meanwhile, at the front, John Bedifer and Graham Sanders. Bedifer came out maybe a couple of tenths closer to Graham Sanders than he was before, but it certainly wasn't the big impact that he was maybe hoping for. Austin Young, 5.5 seconds behind Sanders. He's got to really turn up the wick here on this second stint to get back to the back, at least of his teammate, John Bedifer, if he wants to have a shot at the win by the end of this next stint.
Well, one pit stop cycle down, still one to go as the Butt Kicker Sportscar Series has landed in the Styrian Mountains. Don't go anywhere on RaceSpotTV. The run to the checkered flag and the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring is coming up next. Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 Butt Kicker Sportscar Series. We made our way into the Styrian Mountains to kick off the second half of the season live with the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring. Hello everyone, my name is Arjuna Kankipati. Delighted to be joined alongside by Andrew Kinsella. And Andrew, plenty of excitement still for us to work our way on through, but it is still a Hydra Race geodesic 1, 2 and 3 at the front of the LMDH field.
It is, and if anything, it's slightly tightening up between the top two. John Bedifer, it's been going back and forth between Sanders and Bedifer lap to lap, but certainly the gap is at least staying the same, if not getting slightly tighter between the two of them. So definitely a battle to be had there. Austin Young is starting to fall back into the clutches of Phil Kraus, though. And Kraus did show a lot of speed early on in the race to get even up to the leading quartet in front of him before. So I wonder if Kraus can get around Austin Young, if he has something for the race leaders as well.
We should give some praise as well to the recovery mindset out of Joshua Chin. Qualified all the way back in 18th position at the very back of the GT3 combined field, and has taken advantage of the misfortune of some and made full advantage of the speed on track to climb up into 4th. Still 11 seconds back from Matthew Morhart. Will try and salvage a couple more points to Ryan Otis in the battle for 2nd in the championship. Fight on track for 6th. Caleb Benzie passed Matt Taylor, but by no means with the position secure.
No, Matt Taylor's all over the back of Caleb Benzie right now, and both of them have actually gotten around Alexander Van de Sande on that pit cycle. So it looks like Van de Sande, the number 96, had a little bit of trouble, so he's probably going to be looking to get back through these two as well. And then, of course, before the pit stop cycle, these two were fighting with Michael O'Brien. O'Brien's all the way back down in 11th, so the latter half of this LMDH field is all topsy-turvy after that pit cycle.
There was definitely, I want to say, a speeding penalty for Michael O'Brien because he spent 66 seconds stationary, and so I'm pretty sure that he was feeling the pressure after spinning slightly earlier and trying to make up for it down on the pit lane entry. Gap at the front still 2.5 at the LMDH point. Sean Campbell on his return to the series is not going to make it 10 in 10 today, but the 100% streak will still continue, it would seem. Ryan Otis keeping him at least pushing relatively honestly. 5 seconds the margin at the front of the field.
It's been a solid drive for Otis, and this is so typical of a Ryan Otis style race. He'll get to about 5 seconds back, and then he'll find some speed as he gets more comfortable in the race. And just continue to lap. And Sean Campbell, I think at this point, he's just not taking any risk, and he's just managing that gap to Ryan Otis. But the driver in the GT3s who really is impressing me today is Matthew Morhart. Again, we've been talking about he's been that driver to potentially take that step forward. This today, his performance, only 8 seconds back of Sean Campbell halfway through this race. I think this could be one of the main stepping points forward for Matthew Morhart in this series.
It did take a little less fuel in the pit stop window first time by. Has not been in the draft in the second stint, so might have to add a bit more fuel to the tank come the final pit stop of the race, but only time will tell there. Now that this BMW has some friends in the prototype class on iRacing, some new friends teased as well to potentially join the fun in the upcoming build not far away here on the iRacing platform, it becomes a case of, for the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team, for instance, watching and having to battle, not just in this car, Andrew, but in some of the other ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things, the beauties of multi-class racing on iRacing is that not only do we have multiple classes, but outside of the Lionheart series, we have multiple cars within those classes, and each of them comes with its own unique quirks, its own style, and often driving and hopping between the different cars will teach you different things about your driving style and really make you a better driver. So it's really cool that we're going to have more cars for the LMDH side of things and to really hone your prototype skills.
Yeah, still a bit of time for the drivers to figure out which one they really want to drive. I guess moving forward in the long term, these drivers still have the rest of the year to focus on this particular M Hybrid V8 with its turbo-powered engine as well. Would enjoy the slight altitude that we do have at this track. Michael O'Brien is going to go a lap down, has already been passed by Graham Sanders, but the margin to Betafer has come down to now 1.4 seconds. The 67's on the charge. And with a slightly different strategy between the two, Betafer came in those couple of laps earlier. Might still have some strategy to play at the end of this race.
Yeah, that last lap was not a good lap for Graham Sanders. It almost looked like he may have made a small mistake in that middle sector. Cost him some time there. O'Brien being a gentleman and allowing John Betafer in there, but the gap's down to under a second and a half now, and that's starting to get into draft territory for John Betafer. So definitely this race is nowhere near over.
Definitely not. Phil Krause in danger as well of latching on to the draft of Austin Young. So on a couple of fronts, the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team starting to be a bit more under fire. There's the distinctive pink of the 91. This is that middle sector where, Andrew, we've been talking about the difficulty of passing, and look at Krause setting it up.
Really nice pass there from Krause, and that's what you have to do to get around the GT3 traffic in this middle sector, is just take advantage of where you know your car is going to be better than the slower traffic. So For Phil Krause, it was all about nailing that corner exit, making sure that he compromised his line slightly so that he could time that exit perfectly. That's a perfect example of how to overtake the GT3 cars responsibly.
Flynn Lazier's 10-second longer pit lane excursion. Still not sure if that was penalty related or something else. Means that the number 4 not in a fight inside the top 4, but in terms of speed and lap times, Lazier is still amongst one of the quicker cars out on track. I feel like track position's important here, Andrew, with traffic. I would want to lead this race if I had the choice, which I don't.
See, I almost disagree. Well, so it depends on how close John Baderfer can get. If he can get within about half a second of Graham Sanders, I would prefer to be in Baderfer's position. Where Sanders is right now, I like his position better simply because it's very easy for him to slot a GT3 car or two in between himself and Baderfer at this point. But once that's no longer possible, once Baderfer can sort of follow Sanders through, it becomes much easier to be the following prototype than it does to be the leading prototype.
I see what you mean. I guess the question becomes, now with 3 of the GT3s retired via Vigo and Herrick, and that pack increasingly split up, is traffic as bad as it was in the earlier stages of this race? You mentioned that Alexander Van der Sant had been passed in the pit stop window by Taylor and Bensi. Well, the 96 has been able to get back on through. Taylor's now back in front of the race first machine.
That was actually a torrid lap there for Bensi. Sorry, Arjuna. That was I think Bensi must have made a mistake at some point in that lap because both Van der Sant and Taylor got around him last lap, and he seems to be really struggling with the car all of a sudden.
I almost wonder as if there was a little bit of a fisticuffs that led to some of these drivers pushing that just a little bit too wide. Miguel Vigo did say, I had messaged him and asked how it was going before the day came to an end. You want to guess how many incident points, Andrew?
I'm going with 23.
Oh no, you're too low.
Oh, really?
25 out of 28.
After one pit stop, eh?
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. So this is definitely one of those tracks, we've mentioned it before, where, especially if you're not necessarily feeling the balance of the car so much, where you're going to have to work to stay within the confines of the white lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be so important to watch those incident counts if you're the leader of the race, because you can't afford a drive through here.
I really wish that we could see those incident counts. It would be great.
I do as well, but unfortunately for some reason iRacing has said that we can't anymore.
Well, to be fair, that is the kind of information where it's like I can totally see it, and it's never happened in competitive sim racing where one team is watching someone else's Twitch stream trying to say, "Ooh, that team is 4x away from a drive-through."
No, that would never happen.
Never happen.
And they certainly wouldn't have dedicated people watching different streams at different times either.
I mean, at that point, we should just, democratize it. Just make it available to everyone.
That's exactly what I think.
I'm just saying. Anyway. So 1.5 at the very front of the field. It's not going to really change too much. Now, there really wasn't too much of a difference between any of the top 4 drivers. They're all about 27 seconds. Flynn Lazier's 37-second stops, a little bit more equal with Taylor, Bensi, and Guyon. I guess my question still is, does Sanders, Baderfer, Young, and Krause owe us a longer pit stop than Lazier now?
Yeah, I think that... So it's almost like Lazier might be going long on this second stint in order to... Because they came in, with about 53 minutes left to go?
Something. That sounds about right. Yeah.
So if Lazier wants to come in again, you're looking at maybe 18-ish minutes to go, whereas maybe Sanders, Baderfer, and Young, they're coming in closer to 30 minutes to go. that could be what Lazier is thinking, but I don't see that turning out very well for him.
Have to wait and see. We did mention, by the way, for Bensi that there was a slow lap in there. I think we're about to find out. Well, find out more, but that raises more questions than I think gives us answers there.
Well, that's just called surfing the sausage curb. He didn't just get into the sausage curb. He got on the sausage curb, and it threw him into the wall, and that's where it looked like the damages come from for Bensi. That I was saying he wasn't looking too happy with the car.
And that will cost him actual physical speed as well. Phil Krause has lost some time with traffic, now almost 3 seconds back of third place Austin Young. Badefer within a second of the race leader. Traffic as ever, frequent and frustrating, I am sure. But both drivers have been patient so far, neither going to get in trouble just now.
No, but that definitely wasn't the ideal place for Badefer to catch Sanders or catch the lap car, but meanwhile Sanders went wide on the exit, so it sort of came out in the wash there. But you notice that again, it's just into that sort of 0.7 of a second, and is going to get even closer now through this section. So once it gets under about a half second, that's the sort of place where Badefer really wants to keep the gap going forward here.
Thing to remember is on both sides of the equation, the traffic will give and it will take. So even if you are Sanders and you feel like you've pulled the short straw a couple of times, a couple of consecutive corners, there will come a time when it will swing back in your favor and you can't get too frustrated. We are ticking down, almost 1 hour complete. One of the GT3 cars straddling that curb and showing us that it is definitely one of those danger spots to watch out for. I feel like for John Badefer, after putting it on pole, it's a good opportunity to save a little bit more fuel, to play the strategy game just that little bit, and maybe conserve the tires a little bit as well for a bit of a blast if you can go longer on the fuel run.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some opportunities for these drivers to have a little bit of strategy come into play, but the thing is, right now, I think the hardest thing for these drivers is there's no real clear direction as to which is going to be faster, because I do think that having fresh tires is going to make a difference. And getting towards the end of the run, the tires are really going to start to go away just with the track conditions the way that it is. So it's so difficult to tell whether the undercut or the overcut is going to be the right strategy here.
The thing that we are seeing, though, is with the traffic being so distributed that maybe the effect of tires not as much of a factor. It's more whether you get lucky with the traffic or not, because best lap of the race for Sanders is an 18.755 last time by, punched in an 18.939, and that is almost halfway through the fuel run, at least given the capacity of the tank that we saw inside of the first 37 minutes of racing. Check back in with the Synergy Motorsports duo for a sec, because to your point on Matthew Morhart closing up to Ryan Otis and making it now potentially a fight for second spot.
Yeah, Morhart has just been really, really solid all race long, and I've just been so impressed with what he's been doing, particularly on this second stint. He's been keeping pace right with Ryan Otis and even gaining on his teammate there. So you gotta say Morhart really hasn't put a wheel wrong all race long.
No, it's definitely been a calculated drive, and this is a track where, even though we say 10 corners, there's not much to many corners to master. It's still technical in its nature. You need to maximize the track, and you see so often the drivers pushing the bounds on entry and exit to make sure that the momentum they carry can be maximized. And so it's definitely not to be understating the job that we continue to see out of Matthew Morhart. Now 1 second back at the very front of the field. Traffic's giving a little bit back to our race leader.
Yeah, it is. Badefer has fallen back to about a full second back now. They just had to negotiate. I believe that was Alex Gouy on one of the LMDHs going one lap down here to your race leaders. So I think that Sanders just caught Guyon at a little bit more opportune place on the track compared to Betafort. Betafort had to compromise his line through turn 3 a little bit, and it's cost him a couple of tenths of a second there.
Still time to be made up, though. Austin Young has a full 3-second buffer back to Phil Kraus now as well. And we are potentially expecting a little bit of a mix-up in the fuel times when we dive down into the pit lane in the next handful of laps. It has very much stagnated, by the way, through the rest of the field. But you do have a couple battles going on, including inside of some of our AM drivers, where Trevor Malone, in the absence, of course, of Chase Wilson, trying to maximize the points on offer.
Yeah, Trevor really needs to try and do whatever he can to get into the top 10 here, because without Chase Wilson in the field, if he can't sort of crack into the top 10 where the points start to go up a little bit more, he's really wasting his opportunities here to narrow the lead down on Wilson.
Yep. The mid part of the season as well has seen a bit of a downturn in the number of cars, and so maybe the opportunities have been higher, but it's also been pretty frenetic. Last time out at Monza was definitely an interesting one for many drivers. You can hear the klaxon going off in pit lane. Travis Jägerlehner going to head off down to the lane and make a slightly early final pit stop today. Gap opened up slightly at the front. Betafort now 1.5 away from the leader. That's another one. Caleb Benty that's going to make a trip down towards the pit lane. Last 30 minutes, we know that if you come down now, you are good to the checkered flag.
Yeah, this is definitely, it'll be interesting to see who does what strategy. I think you're right that John Betafort is probably going to look to do something different from Graham Sanders. Now, the question for me is, does he go a little bit longer, or does he go shorter again? We know he went shorter the first time around, but I think that he took in possibly a little bit more fuel than Sanders did, so it's going to be interesting.
Still are some cars that can be thrown. Draft, of course, within 1.2, 1.3 seconds where you get the most meaningful impact there, and that's what Matthew Morhart's been able to do within 1.1 of his teammate Ryan Otis down out of turn number 4-5. Trying to remember what corner number that actually is. 4.
Yeah, that would be turn 5. 4.
Again, corner numbers are a suggestion in most places in the world, so that is, for the most part, besides the point. It has been a remarkably uneventful race so far today, Andrew.
It really has been. Of course, we have mentioned the one thing that we haven't been able to keep track of is probably the one thing that's going to matter most at the end of this race, which is off tracks. Because not only will it dictate whether or not you have a penalty, but it'll also dictate whether or not a driver is able to press in this final stint properly, if they have the room to push or not. But we have our first prototype down on pit lane, and it is John Betafort going slightly shorter this time.
And it's going to be important to come out in a position, hopefully, of some clean air, and to maximize the fresh tires that are definitely going onto that machine up on the jacks. One of those changes, of course, that the GT3s have seen to match the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship fuel and tires at the same time. It's another 28.2 second stop there for Betafort, so pretty equal in terms of stop times across the two. And now out on track and in some relatively clean air.
Yeah, that was a fairly risky pit exit there from Betafort. He knows that he has to maximize these in and out laps, and I think that he's going to be very happy with the clean air that he enters into there.
Is Sanders going to respond immediately? Yes, he is. You can tell just by how the prototype slowed in the middle of that penultimate corner, and now cycling on through. An immediate response coming. And for Betafort, with the warm temperatures that the track has, the benefit there will be the tires get into their window just that little bit faster. Sanders hits the marks. Austin Young still out on track. We watch the two other Hydro Race contenders rolling in the final pit stop window.
Very much not surprising that Sanders responded immediately to John Betaford. It was definitely the safest thing to do there in that situation, is just don't even allow a different strategy to play out. And it was, since Betaford blinked first, it was really easy for Sanders to cover him off there. Maybe a little bit longer, 27 seconds, so right, very close, but he's actually come out right behind Alex Guyon on this pit exit, so this is not what Sanders was hoping for there, with Guyon coming out like that.
It is a clear margin, though. That is the more important thing. 1.2 seconds quicker in the box itself, almost 2 full seconds quicker in the lane, so better execution from Sanders in the window means the margin holds. And now it's just going to be a knockout, drag-out fight on the track itself, unless Flynn Lazier can wow us with some very magical fuel wizardry.
Yeah, I don't think Lazier is really in the conversation at this point. Again, I think he's probably going to come down somewhere between 18, 17, 16 minutes to go. If what I think he's done is what's happened. But Young and Kraus are on pit lane this time by. Let's see if they can get anywhere closer to Betaford, because I think Betaford has really been blocked by some traffic here in these last couple of laps. So not the outlaps he was hoping for, and maybe an opportunity for Young to snatch second away from Betaford here.
I think the margin's going to be just that little bit too big, given it was almost 6 full seconds. Both Kraus and Young are on the jacks. Kraus is smoking up the rear tires without even having the contact on the ground. Sanders through, Betaford through. Kraus is going to have plenty of work to catch the third of the Hydro Race geodesic cars. Does look as though they are making a strong case to have a 1, 2, and 3 here today.
Yeah, certainly Phil Kraus is basically the last man who can break up the podium lockout for Sanders, Betaford, and Young, barring any mistakes from the drivers themselves, of course. Meanwhile, the last bit of our prototype traffic, except for Flynn Lazier, who is leading, by the way. He is 15 seconds in front of Graham Sanders right now on track. But Van de Sant and Taylor down pit lane this time by.
Yep, just getting those final contenders making their stops. We're still waiting for the final trickle down of the GT3s. Should happen in the next handful of laps, you would have to assume. Sean Campbell now leads by almost 10 full seconds, with Matthew Morhart locked in the foot tracks of his teammate. Ryan Otis gets scared there, as not one but two of the geodesic prototypes slide on through. And now a change around, because I think Ryan Otis wanted to come down to pit lane. Matthew Morhart's going to, other way around. Morhart wanted to come in. Otis stays out for that one additional lap.
Yeah, I think that's a byproduct of Morhart taking slightly less fuel last time through the pit cycle, so he's coming down first this time by. But what a drive from Morhart, really stamping his authority on that third place. And we talked about the recovery drive that Josh Chin was on, but it definitely stalled out as soon as he got into that fourth position, and Morhart really hasn't given him any shot at getting up to the back for a podium position here.
It's been a drive as well where for Morhart, staying out of trouble is usually one of those things that you want to do. You don't necessarily want to be on screen for plenty of drama. That's not been what we've seen. 23 minutes to rumble, and now Flynn Lazier is the last prototype that requires a pit stop. 22 becomes 23 laps out there on the track, and if a trip down pit lane is going to cost you about 40 odd seconds, I don't think for Lazier that's going to be any better than slotting him into the 5th spot.
Yeah, I think Lazier is definitely on track for a 5th position. You might just be able to get it down to 35 seconds and maybe have a shot at Kraus with fresh tires, but I highly doubt it at this point. I don't think that Lazier was strong enough in that middle stint to really be able to take the battle to Kraus. Going long on a stint like this, it really does put a lot of load on your tire. So even though he's low on fuel at this point, his tires are definitely more worn out than Kraus's ever were during his stint. So I think it's just a slight strategy miscalculation from Lazier there.
The crazy thing about this back half of the season is just how different some of the tracks that we've got coming up are. Next up after this, we'll cross back over the pond and make our way over to Road America. It does not get very different in terms of philosophy between two types of tracks. It's going to be interesting to see how it gets on. We're going to get a drag race out of pit lane, though. Ryan Otis on the inside. Morhart in the 62 with the speed, the momentum, and the tires already back up into the window. Teammates going to be alongside into the braking zone. And the 62 of Morhart trying to go the long way around to try and switch it back and then make the move into turn number 4.
Yeah, the wily veteran Ryan Otis there. He knows how to get the car stopped on those cold tires, and he was just able to do so into that corner. But Morhart, as you can see, he's all over the back of his teammate. I think that these two are definitely going to be battling to the end here, because Morhart definitely looks like he's got more speed at this point in the race than Otis does.
Might just take a half a lap to switch the tires on, but it could leave the 95 vulnerable. Here are at least one of your two leading at the front. Baderford's lost a bit of ground on this lap, and that gap has grown back out up to 2 full seconds.
Yeah, there was just some unfortunate GT3 traffic for Baderford. As look at him light up the tires coming out of the corner. That's definitely not going to help his speed.
Yeah, there's definitely not a lack of effort, not a lack of commitment going on right now. I really feel as though we're going to see Matthew Morhart pushing all the way up into second spot. 20 minutes with which to work. Everyone in the GT3 field, with the exception of Sean Campbell and Lionel Kalisto, have made their final pit stop so far today. Is Morhart going to get the run on this lap, or is he going to have to wait a couple more laps to make something happen?
Yeah, I think Morhart definitely wants to try and make this move as soon as he possibly can. He's in this sort of difficult position where you don't want to race your teammate too hard and make too desperate a move, but having a second place that close in front of you, it's got to be tempting to try and chuck it down there one of these times.
And only issue is that your teammate's involved in a championship fight, and the one thing that you definitely do not want to do is rob them of a couple of points in what is right now a fight for second. But if Sean Campbell ever does experience a couple more issues, that could very quickly become a fight for first. They will be assisted by some traffic that pulls to one side. I believe that was Gabe Wood in the 04 machine that allowed them through without too much drama. There comes, once again, the net race leaders. Flynn Lazier into the final 18 odd minutes without coming down to make his final pit stop. And the margin between those top two, in effect, still holds at about 2 and a bit seconds. For John Baderford, it's going to come down to potentially needing the traffic to be his best friend.
Yeah, Baderford definitely needs an assist from the traffic at this point. He's got... they both have Matt Taylor to negotiate at this point. Although, Sanders has already negotiated him, and Taylor does pull off to the side there, allowing Sanders through as well. Baderford through as well. But yeah, I think he's got to hope that Sanders gets balked at some point here, because I don't think he has the speed without the draft. If he can get into the draft, I think he can wring enough out of that car to maybe get to the back and throw it up there on a wing and a prayer, but it's going to take a lot for Baderford at this point.
It is definitely going to require a bit of help, and that time running away, laps running away as well. Lazier going to be due down to pit lane in 2 or so laps. There is that fight for second. Morhart's up the inside, and Otis not going to be able to give it a good look into the second sector, because those prototypes are coming through, and now finally the Synergy Motorsports teammates are swapped around.
Yeah, speaking of Graham Sanders, he was actually negotiating alongside of both of them as Morhart and Otis. Morhart got a really good run out of turn 3 all the way down the back straightaway, and they were side by side. But look at Otis. He's not giving Morhart any rest here, and he's chucked it down the inside of 10.
They have about 11 seconds back to Joshua Chin, but they do not want to bring that 73 too close into the mix. The teammates once again will be alongside, and in a photo finish effectively at the line. Oh, there's a thousandth or so between them. Morhart up the inside, and with the sausage curb on the outside, Otis knows that he can't fight that one around, and once again another one of the Hydra Race prototypes blossom by. They'll be 3 wide on the climb into turn number 3.
What a battle this is between the two teammates, and they've been so clean with each other as well, swapping runs, swapping inside and out. Looks like Otis is going to have the inside here, but look at Morehart stick it around the outside there this time. Last time we saw him do the crossover move, but this time he kept alongside of his teammate, and I think he's going to have a really nice run here into turn 4.
It's going to be lost to the late breakers, and the camber falls away. So on the inside, you can be a bit more aggressive. And that means Ryan Otis will hold the position as leader in class. Sean Campbell comes in with 16 minutes to go to make the final pit stop of the race. Is going to re-emerge at the front of the field. The question is going to become, for Flynn Lazier, where does the 4 end up feeding out? It's 13.1 for Campbell. So a very short pit stop. To extrapolate from that, expect maybe a 20-second pit stop from Lazier, who is not going up on the jacks.
Yeah, Lazier is not taking tires here, which is an interesting move given what we've seen of the tires here. 17.4 for Lazier, so he's going to be in contact or thereabouts with Kraus, certainly much closer than he was before this pit cycle, but I just don't think he's going to have the tires to be able to do anything.
Margin is going on 50 plus seconds to Van der Sant behind, so I guess it was worth the gamble. Don't think the gamble is necessarily going to pay off in the fashion that was expected. Michael O'Brien has run off the track. He has lost out 10th position to David Sirrar at the front. 3 seconds now split Badefer and Sanders in what is a crucial phase of the race. Couple of laps without traffic. This might decide who comes out on top.
Yeah, and I think that the race is slowly slipping away from John Badefer at this point. He just doesn't quite have the speed without the draft of Graham Sanders. He just doesn't have the outright pace here today. So I think at this point, Badefer is slowly resigning himself to the second position right now.
Still in terms of points, with such a long way to go in the championship, you take the second and what it comes with. We can focus our attention then on these teammates once again. Teammates have fought plenty today without crashing. It's good to see.
Absolutely. And I will say that if you're going to fight with your teammate, there's probably no better teammate to fight with than Ryan Otis, because he is always so in control of his car, and he's such a conscientious driver as well. So there will always be that room that you need in order to race cleanly when you're racing with a driver like Ryan Otis.
Absolutely. They've got still 21 seconds up the road to Sean Campbell, who has, on his return to the series, on his return to the car, picked off right where he left off from. Back up front, back on top, and with a margin that I think is a bit scary, given that some of the races just before his one race absence saw some pretty close gaps.
Yeah, but at the same time, this track really doesn't lend itself to the draft and staying in contact the way some of the other tracks did. So I'm not especially surprised to see the gap that we're seeing today with Sean Campbell to Ryan Otis. Particularly, what we've heard that this is not necessarily the easiest GT3 car to tame around this track today. Obviously, combined with the track temperature that it is today, so it doesn't surprise me that a driver just of the skill level of Sean Campbell is just that one cut above here.
They're all dealing with the same setup across both classes. I say across both classes. It's a different setup in the GT3s than in the LMDHs, but
I certainly hope that the GT3 setup isn't on the LMDH.
No, exactly. But it's common, frustrations, I'm sure, to many. But you've got to adapt your driving style to what you have been presented. There's been plenty of attention up towards the front. Let's see if we're getting a fight for 6th position in the GT3s as Tyler Graf, after spinning slightly earlier, tries to bounce back and repass Andrew Marquez.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a recovery drive for Tyler Graf here today, and he's doing a really good job cruising up onto the back of Marquez. Marquez is another driver, though, Arjuna, that we haven't really talked about him hardly at all today, and that's probably the best compliment that we can pay him, is because he's just had a completely uneventful race, and he's setting himself up for potentially a top 6 or top 7 here.
It's definitely looking like attrition has not played its traditional role, but definitely has still allowed some to quietly pick their way forward. For Creighton Carter, I'm not sure exactly what's happened here, but seemingly a technical issue. The brakes, maybe the steering not working as expected. We can jump on board into the middle sector. Things just not looking...
That was an engine.
Is that an engine? Things sound alright.
No, it looked like, or it sounded like he had some sort of crash there. If you go on board again. Oh, that was definitely some kind of failure.
Yeah, there's a hardware failure of some kind.
I heard the distinctive crash of some kind of engine failure there, Arjun.
I heard the engine running totally fine, so I'm not sure exactly what that might have been, but it clearly was not a healthy issue by any means. It's unfortunate, and Creighton Carter joins Carlos Villa, Miguel Vigo, and Jim Herrick. 4 GT3s retiring, all 11 LMDHs still out there.
Yeah, it's been a really strong race for the LMDHs. Normally we see at least a little bit of carnage with those prototypes, but they've all behaved themselves rather well today, and I will say that the traffic has behaved itself rather well for these LMDHs as well.
Yeah, I think I expected a bit more drama, to be honest, today. But fortunately, I'm not complaining. It's been pretty good, all things considered. Michael O'Brien has had another slip-up out on track, by the way, in a fight with David Siwa. Oh, and that's a much bigger clip into the wall than I thought it might have been.
If ever there was a commentator's curse about all the drivers finishing, I think that you might have just claimed that one, Arjuna.
This one happened before. We're just seeing the replay now.
Sure.
It's on the brakes as well. We thought we had dialed that out for the most part, drivers having the rear step out on them in this hybrid, but seemingly something that I'd heard mentioned before, and therefore something that maybe we'll be talking about a bit more frequently in the final stages of this season. O'Brien's going to come back down to the pit lane. We've got 10 minutes to go. Can Otis hold on to second here?
Yeah, he's turned up the wick just a little bit after Morehart was really giving him a run for his money. But I think that Morehart might have at least one more lunge at him in his tank. He just needs to get back to the back of the number 95 there, and I think he can do it, but he's running out of time.
The laps are definitely ticking down, with our race leader off into the opening corner. I would posit that we maybe have 6 or 7 laps left to run, and with 3.6 at the front, I definitely don't think we got a fight for first or second. Phil Kraus is trying his best to latch onto the back of Austin Young. 2 seconds splits them.
Yeah, he's been doing absolutely everything that he possibly can to get to the back of Austin Young. He had to negotiate the slightly slower traffic of Matt Taylor going 1 lap down, but yeah, the traffic gives and the traffic takes away, and unfortunately Kraus just caught that GT3 car at the wrong time, and that's going to put him maybe 2-3 tenths of a second back. So at the beginning of the race, it's not that big a deal, but as we get towards 8 minutes to go, 2 or 3 tenths could be all it takes to prevent him from getting into that draft.
Yeah, the most important thing is you now don't get the opportunity to have the traffic come back in your favor. You very much have got to hope that you can get it all swinging in your direction. Matthew Morehart will be hoping that as well. He's almost lost the draft, 1.2 back from his teammate. And the draft, of course, reduced significantly from what it was even going back 6 months ago. It's holding these drivers a little bit more accountable and trying to have to keep closer to the car in front by more natural means. Matthew Morehart, I think now, has got to hope that the traffic can latch him back onto his teammate.
And I will say we were talking about positioning earlier on in the race in terms of where you want to be in a prototype battle. In the GT3 battle, you definitely want to be the leader because it is so much easier to be able to shut the door on a prototype than it is to force them to not or to because you're in the first position rather than shutting it when you're in that second trailing position. So it's much easier for the prototype traffic through no fault of their own, creating the separation that can just kill your momentum.
Some separation now between the two teammates in the form of some traffic. That will also help them out, or rather help Otis out, but very quickly split up and put back together. Got one of the prototypes slicing their way through forward as well, and prototypes that I think are less desperate to make the moves happen, except in this particular case, where the margin for third now down between 1 full second. Phil Kraus up the inside of Otis on the charge to get to the podium.
Yeah, Kraus is in that crucial drafting range now, so I think we really do have a battle here. He's slowly but surely throughout the course of this stint worked his way back up into that drafting range of Austin Young. I think that he's really got a shot at it in these next 4 or 5 laps.
Who's going to be the most aggressive here, though? That's the question. Can Austin Young, you said that the GT3s can kind of fake out a little bit more being in front. Can Austin Young play as a GT3? That is going to be the question. Tyler Graf has closed on his Graphics LC counterpart. It's a fight for 6th position. And we were talking about for AM drivers trying to climb their way into the top 10. Guess what Trevor Malone's been able to do?
And it's just been a nice quiet run for Trevor Malone, and we were doubting him a little bit earlier, but he's done exactly what he's needed to do. Some drivers in front of him have had some misfortune, and he's taken advantage of it. So, I mean, a top 10 is exactly what he needs here to get himself back into the battle with Chase Wilson.
Solid points being accumulated. Of course, drop rounds will come into play as well at some point. But we'll all be doing the math come the very end of the season to try and figure that out. 5 minutes to run. Laps ticking away. Tyler Graf still trying to chase down and be able to offer a move on his teammate. Matthew Morhart's lost out in traffic and is trying to close back up to Ryan Otis. These GT3 cars with their ABS and their traction control, Andrew, a lot of people often think they are easy, but that is definitely not the case. You are hoping to not rely on those driver aids and be as in control of the car as you can be.
Yeah, if you're relying on those driver aids, it essentially means that you're overdriving the car and you're putting it in situations that it's not well suited to, and you're using up the tires, using too much fuel. So you really want to be riding that really fine line where the tools start to kick in but aren't quite there yet, and just being on the edge of the grip without pushing too hard. And it's really a fine balance. The other thing to keep in mind is that these GT3s have such a high center of gravity compared to the prototypes, and so comparatively little downforce, that they really are twitchy, not just on power down, but throughout the course of the corner, and they will dance on you very, very easily.
Definitely not the easiest to hold on to. Tyler Graf now does get past Andrew Marquez, and in these closing stages, the opportunities not going to be that many, you'd think, for the 63 to get back on through. Morhart continues to slide backwards for second. Phil Kraus still trying to hold on in the fight for third.
Yeah, I think Morhart's tires have just about given up the ghost at this point. He had a valiant effort at Ryan Otis, but in the end, I think that number 95, the wily veteran of Otis, is just going to pip his slightly less experienced, at least in Lionheart, teammate to the line here. But yeah, I don't think Kraus has quite given up the ghost yet, and there's some GT3 traffic that could definitely play a role here coming through this tough inner loop here at the Red Bull Ring.
They're only 11 seconds back from the race leader, so with what we'd expect to be 2 laps to go, Phil Kraus is still within 1 second, and that traffic has definitely closed them up. Kraus still has to get through 1 in that penultimate corner, and they've got a very bright red, green, and yellow machine that will cost Austin Young a couple of tenths through the final corner.
Yeah, but it also costed Phil Kraus a couple of tenths as well, because he was not able to apex the way he wanted to. He certainly wasn't able to drive out the way that Austin Young did, but overall that was definitely an advantage to Phil Kraus. He is within 0.7 of a second in closing of Austin Young.
Still time for Kraus to try and get the move done, but just this next lap surely left to run. It'll be 67 laps complete. and a rather interesting start to the second half of the season. There is the race leader, Graham Sanders, who at 4 seconds clear of John Badefer has been able to, after taking the lead, very much control the tempo of the race. Showed a couple of half moves, and then once the commitment was there, slid on through and never looked back.
Yeah, it's been a really, really strong race from Graham Sanders. He wasn't quite as dominant as we saw the last couple of rounds, but as you say, when he needed to be, he really stamped his authority on this race. So coming in, I believe, to take the white flag this time by Arjuna, it's been all Graham Sanders the second half of this race.
The white flag in hand, just one more trip around this Red Bull Ring to go, and one more lap without hopefully any mistakes. Hopefully no drivers too close to those track limits and to the incident points that we've been talking about, because especially in this fight for third, they will be using every little bit of the track that they can. Phil Krause is within maybe 4 car lengths of the third of the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing contingent, but it's not going to be close enough in towards turn number 3.
Young has that draft from the GT3. Krause is going to have to send it down the GT3 to stay in contact, and they do get through, but I don't think Krause quite is close enough. He's got to find a way through this section or hope that Young makes a mistake at this point.
Might have been a lap or two too short in terms of the distance for Phil Krause to have realistically had a crack at being able to fight for the podium, but that's what a poor qualifying will do. It will often leave you with just too much work to do in what is ultimately a rather short 90-minute timed affair. Relatively less chaotic this one than some of the previous races, but the perfect way for the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing team to kick off the second half of the 2023 Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. It's Graham Sanders that wins the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring, leading John Badefer and then Austin Young to a triumphant 1, 2, and 3.
It wasn't quite the dominant performance that Sanders had last time out, but at the same time, it was exactly the type of race that he needed to have, an authoritative way to end it, going away from your teammates, and what a race for Hydro Race Geodesic Racing with 1, 2, 3. Lazier crosses the line in 5th. We've got a long way to wait for 6th place. Meanwhile, Sean Campbell should be coming through pretty soon here.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the HyperX Team Championship, great day for Hydro Race as well. Here comes Sean Campbell to continue the 100% streak, but albeit now with a 1-race intermission. We'll get the AM driver, Trevor Malone, picking up what is a 2nd consecutive win as well in that number 69, and this time in the top 10, grabbing a couple more points in the mix to try and close on Chase Wilson, whose absence, well, hopefully will make us even more excited when he returns to see how the championship is all gonna play out. Alexander Van der Sant didn't want to get in too much trouble in the final sector, avoids collecting Trevor Malone, who comes to the line and grabs the AM class victory. 3 very deserving winners, and as we wait for the final drivers to come across the line to make the results official, we take a look from up above at our host for today here in the Styrian Mountains. A look then at your Butt Kicker race results, where Hydro Race Geodesic Racing 1 and 2, Sanders leading a Badefer, and 4 seconds between them come the end. Austin Young prevails in the challenge for third over Phil Krause, while Flynn Lazier's slightly odd strategy sees him come across the line in 5th all by himself. Alexander Van der Sant, the final car on the lead lap, while Matt Taylor, Alex Guyon, David Silver, and Caleb Bentley all finish in the top 10, albeit 1 lap down. Michael O'Brien, the only DNF effectively in the LMDH category after what was a uncomfortable moment down the hill for him at turn number 4. Meanwhile, in the GT3, Sean Campbell 27 seconds clear of the Synergy Motorsports teammate Ryan Otis and Matthew Morhart. Josh Chin worked his way on forward, but the poor qualifying meant he was never really a contender for a podium despite the 14 positions being gained. Brian Bennett 5th, Tyler Graf, Andrew Marquez, Logan Spath, and then Travis Jaegerlainer the top 9, while Trevor Malone 10th, but your very first AM driver in the running order, just in front of Gabe Wood, while Lionel Kalisto, Jimbo Pfeiffer then split those 2 AM drivers from Drew White and Creighton Carter. 3 retirees joined Carter from watching on from the sidelines, Via, Vigo, and Herrick, or not enjoying the best of runs here today. And so we can dive our way into what is going to be a rather interesting butt kicker post-race show and talk to the winners and get their reaction as to how today's BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of the Red Bull Ring ended up playing out for them. First, let's dive into HyperX Victory Lane, where today's prototype winner Graham Sanders is standing by for us. Graham, a couple of half-hearted moves on your teammate in the early stages, but once you took the lead, you never looked back.
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was definitely challenging. You know, this track is so hard to pass with these cars. I mean, we're not really running out of boost even after 10, 15 laps, and I knew if I wanted to get in the lead, I needed to get there as soon as possible because it was just going to get more and more difficult as tires started to degrade. And I'm glad I was able to get the win there, and also just our first 1, 2, 3 of the season. It took long enough, but I'm glad we managed to do that.
A pretty impressive achievement. I do have to also ask, how many incident points were we at come the end of that race?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question.
Oh, come on, come on.
I was at, where's my name? 22.
Oh, you weren't that bad.
Yeah, I was a little worried at first. I think in the first 5 laps, I think I had about 7 or 8 off track, so.
Well, next up, Road America. You're definitely not going to get away with that sort of track limits pushing when we head to one of the fastest tracks in North America.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. If you get an off track around that track, you're pretty much toast. So I'm excited for that one. I think that's next week, right?
It is 7 days from now.
Well, I better start practicing. So I'm excited, and I'll see you then.
Well, we'll let you go and practice, and we will make our way on over to the GT3 winner, where, once again, Sean Campbell is in HyperX Victory Lane. Sean, 27 seconds clear at the front. How are you feeling returning to us after a 1-race absence?
It's good to be back. I don't know. There definitely wasn't like a boring race. There was still stuff to do and stuff to pay attention to. I mean,
in terms of, we asked the same question to Graham, so I'm going to ask it to you as well. Where were you sitting in terms of the track limits and the incident points?
Oh, I need to check. I think I hit 9.
So you were that fast without even needing to push the limits of the track that much?
I hit 11. My bad.
11. Okay, so Nick Cage watching over your shoulder apparently helped. Road America's up next. How are you feeling about that one, especially given the multi-class nature of the racing?
Road America is going to be good. I think the straights are long enough to where drafting is going to be huge, and the overtaking is probably going to be really, like, the track's going to be really competitive, I think, for racing. More competitive than this track, at least.
So it sounds like Sean Campbell will hopefully have a challenge once more. Congratulations on a 9th victory this year, Sean. We'll see you in 7 days over at Road America.
Peace.
Sean Campbell back on top. Trevor Malone wins another round in the AM category. Trevor, from your perspective, jumping into the top 10, talk us through the day and what you saw.
Honestly, just cruising. I just got a new wheel, Moza R9, and I'm just trying to dial it in the entire time because I had no idea what I was doing.
You'll have a full week, Trevor, with your new equipment before we go racing at Road America. How are you feeling about the fact that in the points you've started to claw things back a little bit to chase and establish yourself a little bit more in second?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the way I want it since he's not here, but I'm trying to get better and better. Hopefully I can get a little bit more consistent with my lap times, and hopefully I can get there.
Well, congratulations on another AM victory, Trevor, and we'll see you at Road America in just a week's time.
Appreciate it, guys.
It's going to be a lot of fun, Andrew, as we make our way over to America's National Park of Speed for the Butt Kicker Grand Prix of Road America. Yeah, track limits. They are effectively the walls when you head over to Elkhart Lake.
And honestly, that's as it should be, Arjuna. I really prefer tracks like Road America where it punishes you simply by the fact that you will likely end up in the wall if you put your car too far out. And really, I gotta say, Road America is probably my favorite track on the service to drive. It's so fast, so furious, and you have to be on it all the time, every single lap, in order to maximize your speed and your time over the course of the race. So I can't wait to see what these drivers do here. It's going to be really fascinating to watch, especially with the multi-class action here. We don't get a lot of multi-class action in real life at Road America, but I think it can really has the potential to have a great race here in a week's time.
I think we're going to be in for potentially even more excitement. Let's not forget, as we take a look at the next level racing schedule, that there is still so much more to come after these back-to-back races, a couple of weeks off before Silverstone, Indianapolis, the Nürburgring, and then Imola, all of course as we run our way to the very end of October and to begin a bit of a championship swing in effect. We'll make a trip over to Japan, stay there for 2 races, and then after that it is all about our trip to Daytona to crown our champions under the night lights. Don't forget though, as we get wrap things up here at the Red Bull Ring, get set to move things across back over to the United States, that you can head on to the Lionheart Racing Series website to learn more about the 3 competitions the sanctioning body puts forward, as well as to learn more about our various partners that make all of this possible. The action will rumble on in just a week's time for the Butt Kicker Grand Prix of Road America, but leaving the Styrian Mountains, it is the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team on top in the prototypes. It's Sean Campbell, victorious and inevitable potentially in the GT3s. On behalf of everyone behind the scenes at RaceSpotTV, for Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, so long for now. We'll see you in 7 days for a blast through America's National Park of Speed.